Linda used to be a strong woman. For 30 years, she worked in healthcare, once serving as the head nurse at a major hospital in Michigan. She was used to making decisions, standing at the edge of life and death, and being respected by hundreds. But after retiring, her world suddenly shrank to a small house, where each day was measured by whether or not a message came from her children. At first, she told herself, "They're just busy." Then she tried to adapt. She learned how to use a smartphone, installed a calendar app to remember her grandchildren's birthdays. She was always ready to cancel any personal plans if one of her children suddenly decided to visit. Once, Linda had spent the whole week preparing to reunite with her old book club friends, but then came a message from her daughter. "Mom, we're dropping by for lunch, okay?" And she canceled. The strange thing was, the more she tried, the more she felt left out. Each time she called and they didn't answer, she texted, "It's okay, I just had a quick question." Each time they gave her feedback, she nodded. Each time they spoke curtly, she forced a smile. Inside, she told herself, as long as they're still reaching out, it's fine. Then one day, everything fell apart. It was her birthday, her 70th. Linda cooked, decorated the table, prepared old photos to share stories. But she was alone. Her daughter had a meeting, her son didn't even text. At 4 p.m., she checked her phone, no notifications. She picked up a bottle of wine, planning to pour herself a glass, but her hand was trembling. She looked around the house. Gifts from previous years still sat unopened in boxes. Handwritten letters had been replaced by seen messages. And she realized she was no longer a priority in her children's lives. But the more painful truth was she was no longer a priority in her own life either. That night, Linda didn't cry. She just lay there, silent. Not because she was fey, but because she was too tired of trying to be loved. The next morning, she wrote in her notebook, "What I want from my children, to be heard, to be allowed to speak my mind, to live by my own routines and habits without being seen as a burden." And she began. The following week, when her daughter asked her to babysit without checking first, Linda calmly said, "I already have plans, dear." When her son remarked, "You really shouldn't say that to the grandkids," she didn't stay silent. She said, "That's something I believe is important. If you'd like to discuss it, I'm open to hearing you." For the first time in years, she didn't apologize for her own feelings. The result? No one ran to hug her and say, "You're amazing, Mom." There was no touching movie moment. But one thing changed, the way her children looked at her, no longer with pity, but with attention. And a few weeks later, her son sent her a strange message. "You okay, Mom? You seem so happy these days." You see, respect doesn't come from sacrifice. It comes from self-respect. Many parents mistake keeping the peace for silent endurance. But the more silent you are, the more your children get used to it, and respect quietly fades away bit by bit. Stopping the need for approval isn't the same as stopping love. It means loving yourself enough not to turn into a shadow in your own family. Try this today. Write down 3 things you honestly want from your children. Don't write what you should want. Write what you long for but haven't dared to say. Then pick one small thing and say it, gently but clearly. You'll be surprised, not because your children change, but because you change the way you treat yourself. If you've ever felt like Linda, leave a number 1 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And don't forget to share this video with all the parents, all those who've given everything but sometimes forget that they too deserve to be respected. Thomas used to be a man held in high regard. For over 40 years, he was a teacher, then the principal of a large high school in the suburbs of Chicago. He was familiar with the attentive gaze of students, the applause in auditoriums, and the respect in every greeting from colleagues. To him, words held weight, and a man's worth wasn't measured by money, but by kindness and wisdom. But then Thomas retired. He moved in with his daughter's family to be close to the grandkids, have some company, as his daughter put it. At first, things were fine. He played with the children, did some gardening, cooked meals, and occasionally offered suggestions on parenting. But slowly, the respect in their eyes faded. Every time he spoke during meals, his son-in-law cut him off. "Are we going down memory lane again, Dad?" Every time he reminded his grandchild to greet your elders, His daughter would say, "Dad, times have changed." Once, while he was sharing his teaching experience, his son-in-law chuckled, "Nobody teaches like that anymore, Dad." Thomas went quiet, but his heart felt squeezed tight. The familiar feeling of someone once standing proudly at the lectern was now just the babysitter, the one who talks too much, the one who's too old to understand. One time, his 7-year-old granddaughter shouted at him, "You're old, what do you know?" He was stunned, not angry, but because that sentence mirrored how his own children had been treating him. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He stepped out onto the balcony, staring at the city lights in the distance. He wondered, have I become a burden, or am I just no longer being heard? But instead of lashing out, he chose silence to listen to himself. The next morning, Thomas cleared his desk. He pulled out an old notebook and wrote down 3 things. 1, do not argue, it only strips away your dignity. 2, do not react hastily, for silence, at the right moment, holds more power than 100 clever words. 3, act like someone of value, not needing recognition, but commanding it by presence. And from then on, he changed how he lived. When someone interrupted him, he smiled, stood up, and left the table. When his granddaughter was rude, he didn't scold. He looked her straight in the eyes and gently said, "I'm very sad that you no longer respect your elders." Then he turned and walked away. Nothing more. He no longer offered unsolicited advice. But when he did speak, it was just one sentence, brief, sharp, like a blade. And strangely enough, people started to listen. His daughter began to say, "Dad, I thought about it the other day, and maybe I was out of line." His son-in-law started texting, "Dad, what do you think about signing her up for extracurriculars?" The same granddaughter, the one who once called him too old, began to show him her drawings, asking, "Do you think I'm any good, Grandpa?" No rebellion, no heated debates, just one man, quiet, composed, standing tall, and that composure made others look up. You see, arguing never earns you more respect. It only traps you in emotional turmoil and diminishes your stature in others' eyes. Older adults often think, if I don't speak up, they'll walk all over me. But the truth is, the more you talk, the more you argue, the more you react, the more you lose your value. On the other hand, when you carry yourself with calm dignity, without needing to win, that's when others begin to revere you. I once knew an elderly mother who said this, "I used to think if my kids didn't listen, I had to repeat myself louder, more often. But the more I spoke, the farther they drifted. Later, I learned to speak once, gently, clearly. If they didn't listen, I stayed quiet, but I didn't step back. I just stood still. And that standing still, that's what made them turn around." You can do the same. Starting today, choose silence when insulted. Not out of weakness, but to preserve your dignity. Choose to listen, not to endure, but to understand where your children are. And when the moment calls for it, speak briefly, clearly, then fall silent and let them reflect. That's not endurance, that's leading with grace. If you've ever found yourself in arguments that left you drained, wondering, was it even worth it? Leave a number 2 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And remember, children don't learn from what you say, they learn from how you live. Susan is 72 years old and has lived alone in a small apartment since her husband passed away 5 years ago. The house that once echoed with laughter is now filled with the ticking of the clock, the wind whistling through the door cracks, in a silence so thick it feels suffocating. Ever since being on her own, Susan's world seems to have shrunk down to her phone. Every morning she brews a cup of coffee and picks up her phone. Not to read the news, not to play games, but just to check, did my kids message me? Most days they didn't. She doesn't blame them. She understands they're busy with work, children, their own lives, but what she never says is her heart still waits. Sometimes, unable to bear the silence, she texts first. "Sweetheart, I just wanted to see how you're doing." Or, "It's raining today, I miss my grandkids." But even then, those messages often go unanswered. She tries not to be sad. But once, when the phone buzzed and she rushed to check, it was just a promotional text. She chuckled, and before she knew it, tears were streaming down her face. Not because she was angry at her children, but because she was starting to lose her sense of self-worth. One day, Susan called her son. Her daughter-in-law answered, curt and wary. "Hi, Mom, we're in the middle of a meeting. Can we talk later?" Then the call ended. At that moment, Susan was standing in front of the mirror, holding a scarf her husband once gifted her. She looked at the woman in the mirror, gray hair, trembling hands, but eyes that still held a glimmer of something unextinguished. She put the scarf down, opened her wardrobe, and pulled out an old photo album. She saw herself from years ago, hair pinned neatly, wearing a long dress, standing in front of a classroom of elementary school students, a confident gaze, a proud smile. She thought, has my entire life's worth come down to whether or not my children call? Is my happiness completely dependent on someone else remembering me? That night, she didn't text, she didn't call. Instead, she opened Google and typed, "dance clubs for seniors near me." The next week, Susan showed up at a local community center, wearing an old pair of shoes that hadn't seen the light in years. Her first steps were clumsy, uncertain, but with each song, her eyes brightened. She learned to dance. She joined an art class. She went on a picnic with old friends. And most importantly, she started living without needing a message every morning to feel she had value. A few weeks later, her son sent her a message. "Mom, how come you've been so busy lately? We've been trying to reach you." She replied, "Oh, I've been painting, dancing, and having such a lovely time." A short reply, but behind it was a life being reborn. You see, the more we cling to attention, the more it slips away. Not because people are unkind, but because they sense our emotional dependence. And emotional dependence is the most fragile form of connection. On the other hand, when you are independent, when you are joyful, purposeful, full of your own world, your children will begin to reconnect. Not out of duty, but out of admiration and true love. Breaking free from emotional dependency doesn't mean being cold or rejecting your children. It means not handing the keys to your emotional well-being to someone else. You are the one responsible for your joy, your happiness, and your worth. If you find yourself in Susan's story, do one small thing today. Write down 5 things you used to love, but let slip away. Maybe photography, cooking, flower arranging, learning an instrument, reading. Then pick one and begin again. Just 15 minutes a day. Not for anyone else, just for you. And you'll be amazed when you live for yourself, fully and wholeheartedly. Those you love will start to return naturally. If you've ever felt like Susan sitting, waiting for the phone to ring, leave a number 3 in the comments, so I know you're still with me. And if you've ever found yourself, again, please share that story to inspire others walking through the same chapter of life. Charles was once a man of remarkable grit. He built his career from the ground up, starting as a salesman and eventually becoming the branch director of a major lumber export company in the Western United States. His life was filled with long business trips, multi-million-dollar contracts, and meetings where people stood to shake his hand the moment he entered the room. But then he retired, and the prestige he once carried, like Charles himself, quietly stepped out of the spotlight. He moved closer to his children, settling into a small house behind his son's home. At first, everything seemed peaceful. He helped drive the grandchildren to school, fixed the fence, watered the plants. But slowly, something started to feel off. Not in their actions, but in how his family spoke to him. One evening, when he offered thoughts on his grandchild's education, his son interrupted. "Dad, things are different now. Don't push old-fashioned ideas." Another time, while Charles was sharing a story during dinner, his daughter-in-law sighed and changed the subject, as if his words were just unnecessary background noise. Charles began to speak less, but inside he wrestled with unease. He wondered, was I too harsh back then? Are they just giving it back to me now? And then, maybe I no longer deserve to be heard? The answer came one late afternoon. While pruning the bougainvillea, he overheard his granddaughter say to her friend, "My grandpa talks too much. My mom says he just likes to butt into everything." He froze, not angry, not reactive, just quietly erased from his own family. That night, he sat alone in his room, pulled out pen and paper, and wrote one sentence, If I don't draw the line, others will draw it for me, and I'll always be on the outside. The next day, Charles printed out a sheet of paper. On it, he wrote, "Guidelines for living with Grandpa. 1. I don't butt into everything, but if I'm speaking, please listen until I finish. 2. I respect your way of life. I expect the same in return. 3. I don't need agreement. I just don't want to be dismissed." He taped the note on his door. When his son saw it, he paused, then asked, "Dad, isn't this a bit too serious?" Charles replied calmly, "If respect feels too serious, then maybe it's something we really need to take seriously." From that day on, something shifted. His son began knocking before entering his room. When Charles gave input, no one cut him off, even if they disagreed. One day, his granddaughter said, "Grandpa, can you keep telling that story? I really liked it." He no longer had to fight for a voice. He was invited to speak. You see, boundaries aren't walls, they're maps that show others where respect begins. Many older adults live with their children under a quiet strain. When interrupted, ignored, or dismissed, they say nothing, telling themselves, "Let's keep the peace." But that so-called peace is just a coat of paint over a crack, and over time, the crack deepens. If you don't speak up when you're crossed, you're teaching others that it's allowed. Boundaries are not expressions of anger. Boundaries are clear messages. I love you, but I also love myself. Boundaries are the courage to say, I disagree, but I'm still listening. Yet most importantly, boundaries are promises that no one else gets to define your worth. If you're living in the gray space between sacrifice and being taken for granted, stop. Write down 3 things you want others to respect about you and choose 1 to voice. You don't need to yell, just be clear. Say, you don't have to agree with me, but I'd like you not to interrupt. The way you speak to me isn't okay. I'm still the elder in this home. If this behavior continues, I'll be stepping back from helping financially. Too harsh? Maybe. But if you don't stand firm, you'll break. And the magic is this: when you speak with calm authority, people don't rebel. They listen. Because dignity commands attention. If you've ever stayed silent for fear of causing tension and ended up hurt, leave a number 4 in the comments. And if you've ever stood your ground, drawn that line, share your story to give courage to someone else who's just getting ready to do the same. Edward was a quiet man, full of love. He had been the financial pillar of his family, working as chief accountant at a company for over 35 years. Throughout his life, he never spent every penny on himself, saving every penny for his wife, his children, and later his grandchildren. When he retired, even though his pension wasn't much, he often dipped into his savings to help the kids when they needed it. At first, he gave freely. One time his son messaged, "Dad, my wife's about to give birth and we don't have enough for the private hospital room." Without hesitation, Edward transferred the money. Another time his daughter said, "Dad, I need to pay the deposit for an English class for the kids." He sent the money again. Then came smaller things, extra tutoring fees, a second-hand motorbike, a new phone for the grandchild. Edward never hesitated. To him, giving was a joy. But then he started to notice something. After the money was sent, there were no more words of thanks. No one asked, "Do you have enough, Dad?" No one said, "Is there anything you need?" Worse, one time he came down with a fever. He called his son, asking for a ride to the hospital. His son said, "I'm in a meeting, Dad. Can you call a cab?" Edward sat alone in the hospital waiting room, clutching his old jacket. No one by his side, no calls, no check-ins. And for the first time in 70 years, he asked himself a question he never had before. Have I been giving too much at the wrong time, in the wrong way? That night, he couldn't sleep. He pulled out his financial journal and began flipping through 5 years of assistance. It was no small sum, but what hurt more than the number was the absence of gratitude. And then he realized, when you give and it's not appreciated, what you're sowing isn't love anymore. It's a habit of being taken for granted. The next morning, he called his children together. For the first time, he spoke without preamble. From today on, I won't be offering financial help unless it's a real emergency. I'm still here if it's truly urgent, but I want you to understand, kindness is not an obligation and support is not an automatic right. His son gave an awkward smile. "Dad, isn't that a bit dramatic?" Edward replied calmly, "It's not dramatic, I'm just learning how to protect my value." At first, his children pulled back. The messages slowed, the visits stopped. But then, something unexpected happened. One day his daughter called not to ask for anything, just to say, "Dad, how are you feeling? I made some seaweed soup. Want me to bring some over?" His grandson sent a message. "Grandpa, I miss when you taught me to make paper kites. Can we do it again?" Edward smiled, a quiet smile, not because he was given more, but because for the first time in years, he received it without having to give it first. You see, we're often taught that giving is noble, and it is. But if you keep giving in the silence of ungratefulness, under the disregard of your children, and at the expense of your own well-being, it stops being love. It becomes a distorted form of sacrifice. When you don't set boundaries, you're teaching others that your generosity is endless, and your help is a default entitlement. And over time, they stop seeing it as a gift. Eventually, when you stop giving, they're not thankful, they're annoyed. If you see yourself in Edward's story, stop. Not to become selfish, but to start giving to the right people at the right time, in the right way. Ask yourself, are you giving out genuine love or out of fear of being forgotten? Are you hoping to be acknowledged through your giving, but receiving silence instead? Are you wounding your own self-respect in the name of sacrifice? If so, try this. This week, turn down one request that's not truly necessary, gently, without anger, and allow yourself to be heard, to be cared for, not because you've given, but because you deserve it. If you've ever given more than you should, leave a number 5 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And if you've ever taken a step back, said no at the right moment, share your story to give courage to those who need it most right now. Grace was, in every sense of the word, the woman of the family. She devoted her youth to raising her children, caring for her husband, ensuring every meal was warm and every night restful. After her husband passed away early, she became even more attached to her children, not just as a mother, but as the thread desperately holding the family together. She turned down outings, declined travel with friends, and passed on invitations to community events. Why? Because she was waiting for the kids to visit on the weekend, waiting until the grandkids were free, waiting until the whole family could be together. Years went by, and she never noticed. Her world slowly became centered entirely around other people. In the morning, she got up early to make porridge and send it over to the grandkids. At noon, she called to remind her children to take their supplements. At night, she messaged them, "It's going to be cold tomorrow. Remember to wear a jacket." And when there was nothing left to do, she felt empty. No one had asked her to do these things, but she did them anyway because she believed that if she didn't, then what meaning would her life have? One evening over dinner, she casually reminded her daughter to spend less time working and more time with her family. Her daughter put down her chopsticks and replied gently but coldly, "Mom, please don't interfere so much in our lives anymore." That sentence, like a small blade, severed what Grace had always thought was closeness. She stayed quiet, didn't react. She finished her meal and quietly returned to her room. That night, she didn't cry, but she stared for a long time at the family photo on her desk. And for the first time in many years, she asked herself, besides being a mother, a grandmother, who else am I? The next morning, she dug out her old journals. On one page, she had written, "I once wanted to learn to paint. I used to love lavender flowers. I once dreamed of standing on a hill, reading poetry alone." She smiled, a soft smile, but aching. And then she did something no one expected. She signed up for a piano class at the community center. The first week, she was unsure. Her fingers were slow, her hearing not as sharp. But she was patient, not to impress anyone, and not seeking praise. The second week, she brought a small bouquet of lavender to class, placed it on her table, a quiet reminder to herself, "I'm still here." By the third month, she started traveling with a senior group. After each trip, she brought home a photo, not one with her children or grandchildren, but of herself smiling, rowing a boat, camping by a stream. When her daughter asked, "Mom, you've been busy lately, huh?" Grace simply smiled and said, I'm living the life I once left behind. No bitterness, no resentment. But after that, her daughter began asking for her opinion on big decisions. Her grandchild started saying, "My grandma sings beautifully." Her neighbors asked her for book or music recommendations. Grace had found her way back to herself, and because of that, she regained the respect she'd quietly lost. You see, when your life revolves entirely around your children, you don't just lose your freedom, you may unintentionally make your children feel burdened. Love without freedom becomes pressure, and when you live just to matter in someone else's eyes, you slowly begin to fade. But when you have a life of your own, full of color, passion, and energy, you become a source of inspiration, not someone to pity. If you've been living like Grace, waiting for a call, waiting to be needed, waiting for attention, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, when was the last time you did something simply because you enjoyed it? When was the last time you truly felt free? Then try this. Write down 5 things you once loved but have since set aside. Choose one and bring it back. Take a dance class. Go to the movies alone. Plant a new flower. Sign up for yoga. Start journaling each morning. Anything that makes you feel alive, not just present. You don't need anyone's permission to do this. You only need your own. And when you live fully within your own world, you'll not only be respected again, but you'll inspire your children and grandchildren to live with authenticity and purpose too. If you've ever lost yourself because you lived only for your family, leave a number 6 in the comments, so I know you're still with me. And if you've ever found yourself again, tell me what helped you change. Your story might give someone else the courage to begin. There's one thing no one teaches us about growing old, that even family, if not rooted in clarity and mutual respect, can hurt us just like any other relationship. You've raised your children, guided them, sacrificed your entire life. But now if you feel overlooked, dismissed, or unheard, that doesn't mean you've lost your value. It simply means it's time to live differently. In this video, we've walked through 6 powerful yet loving actions. 1. Stop seeking approval, because respect begins with self-respect. 2. Don't argue, led by example, because dignity echoes louder than words. 3. Break free from emotional dependency, because your existence is not tied to being remembered. 4. Set and uphold boundaries, because love does not mean allowing pain. 5. Stop giving when there's no appreciation, because kindness deserves the right place. 6. Build a life beyond your children, because you are still a soul with desires, not just a parent. You can't force others to respect you, but you can make them feel compelled to through how you live, how you love yourself, and how you show up in this life. I don't expect you to change everything after just one video, but try starting with one small shift, a firm no, a new class, a forgotten hobby. And bit by bit, you'll see your children will start to listen more. Your grandchildren will learn something from your grace, and you will step into aging not with weariness, but with the radiance of someone who's come home to themselves. Now leave a comment and with the number of the point and that resonated with you most, so I know you're still here. And if you think someone needs to hear this, a friend, a family member, maybe even your own child shares this video with them. Because sometimes just one timely conversation can change the entire journey of parenthood.